Good day, everyone. Welcome. My name is Loreto Atamosa, your instructor for JED 1 with the description Understanding the Self. So for today's video, we will talk about digging deeper into oneself. So this is a 4-part video discussion, and for today's video, we will focus on the emotional self, which is lesson 1, fundamentals of emotions. And our objectives for this video discussion are the following. First is to discuss the nature and kinds of emotion, to identify the psychological reactions to emotions, and to enumerate ways of controlling and managing emotions. Alright, so this is a video discussion on the emotional dimension of the self. So it broadly tackles the different aspects of human emotions and reactions that are embedded in an individual's different emotional experiences. It also covers discussion on emotional management strategies. But first, let's talk about emotion. So what is emotion? Emotion is a natural instinctive state of mind deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationship with others. It is essential for how one sees the world that becomes necessary to view emotion in a way in order to interpret it scientifically. So as such, every emotional response from love to hate, fear to joy, and everything in between can be summed up, although not perfectly, as purely physiological responses to environmental events that serve to motivate away from harm and towards reward. While this is a rather bold assertion, it enables one to look at emotional responses objectively and on a purely neurological level. Think of emotions as waves of energy that flow through our bodies and communicate to us. We are built to feel a full spectrum of core emotions such as anger, fear, joy, sadness, excitement, and disgust. These core emotions help us understand, connect, and communicate with others. They also help us to connect with ourselves. Emotions help us understand whether we should flee from danger, stand up for ourselves, or give someone a hug. Feeling our emotions has been an important part of our evolution and survival as a species, and when felt fully, these emotions can help us live a more connected and full life. Unfortunately, over the years, many humans have been taught to believe that emotions are the enemy and that they need to be tamed, pushed down, numbed, or controlled. We have even gone so far as to label someone emotional or emotionally sensitive as a negative connotation, instead of celebrating this incredible ability that lives within all of us. Emotional awareness helps us to know what we need and want or don't want. It helps us build better relationships. That's because being aware of our emotions can help us talk about feelings more clearly, avoid or resolve conflicts better, and move past difficult feelings more easily. Here is a video discussion of Plutchik's Wheel of Emotion, prepared to us by Patricia Jenkinson. Here, let's watch this.
Dr. Robert Plutchik, who Wikipedia credits as the developer of one of the most influential classification approaches for general emotional responses, created the emotion wheel, listing 8 basic emotions. You can think of these emotions as 4 parts of opposites: joy and sadness, acceptance and disgust, fear and anger, and surprise and anticipation. He also classified them as positive, joy, acceptance, anticipation, and surprise, or negative, anger, fear, disgust, and sadness. According to Plutchik, we cannot experience opposite emotions at the same time, such as the positive emotion of acceptance and the negative emotion of disgust. In fact, this is a major criticism of Plutchik's approach, as many disagree, citing the example of joy and sadness on opposite ends of the emotion wheel and a positive and a negative emotion, which many parents report feeling when their children head off to college or get married. He did suggest that we can experience blends of emotions. If you look at the emotion wheel, joy and acceptance are right next to each other. If you combine these two, you'll have the complex emotion of love. In the same way, combining acceptance and fear produces submission. Fear and surprise result in awe. Surprise and sadness produce disappointment. Sadness and disgust create remorse. Disgust and anger turn into contempt. Anger and anticipation yield aggressiveness, and anticipation and joy produce optimism. And again, Plutchik believes that contradictory blended emotions, such as love and remorse, cannot exist at the same time. Plutchik also proposed that emotions vary in their intensity. Think of the emotion wheel as just one level or row in a solid cylinder, often called the emotion solid. The emotions at the top of the solid, above Plutchik's basic emotions, are more intense, while those at the bottom of the solid are less intense. You can probably see it easier if we spread out the solid. Notice that anger, when more extreme, is rage, while when less intense, it is merely annoyance. More intense than joy is ecstasy, while serenity is a more muted emotion. You'll probably notice that as emotions become less intense, they are more difficult to tell apart and label. In fact, we may not even have the vocabulary words for what we are experiencing. Let's end with some interesting findings about emotions. Interesting, but perhaps not surprising. If you want to estimate the intensity of an emotion, pay attention to posture and gestures. As an example, someone who is angry tends to gesture very quickly and sharply. Women tend to be better than men at recognizing emotions, particularly ones related to vulnerability, oftentimes without being aware that they are doing it. And women are also more nonverbally expressive, meaning they use nonverbal cues to express their emotions. There is some evidence, however, that men are better at noticing emotions involving lust and anger. The older you get, the more accurate you are at reading other people's emotions. Probably not surprising. The longer you live, the more experiences you have to help you recognize emotions. And there are differences by culture. You are more accurate at interpreting emotions when you are communicating with someone from your same culture than when you are communicating with someone from a different culture. Another interesting finding is where you focus your attention on facial expressions. If you are from a culture that values emotional control, like Japan, you tend to look at the eyes for emotions. However, if your culture tends to be more open about expressing your emotions, like the United States, you tend to focus on the mouth for cues as to how people feel. Regardless of your sex, age, or culture, emotions are a natural part of life. Even naturalist Charles Darwin recognized their importance to our ability to survive. So you can't and shouldn't stop experiencing emotions. The major question is, how will you manage your emotions? Well, that is a topic for another video.
Alrighty! Wonderful, isn't it? So based on the presentation, Plutchik's configuration of emotion, there are 8 fundamental emotions, namely joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation. Plutchik's wheel of emotion demonstrates how emotions are related to one another. Emotions adjacent to one another in the wheel are closely related and can be combined. So the combinations can be found on outer part of the wheel. For instance, love is a combination of joy and trust. Meanwhile, emotions across other are conceptual opposites. For example, sadness is the opposite of joy, and anticipation is the opposite of surprise. And so the 8 fundamental emotions also come in a variety of intensities. Those nearest to the center signify the most intense form of emotion, while those farthest far from the center 8 weaker forms. Alrighty, and that's it for the first lesson under digging deeper into oneself. See you in the next video. Goodbye!